Hello, welcome to my video. In this video I will talk about tattoos, which have a very ancient history. Have a good time. Before I talk about tattoos, there is one thing that it would be better to talk about, and that is our body, which is an instrument of meaning. The body is not only a whole that emerges from the coming together of its constituent parts. The body is much more than that, because there are meanings and thoughts attributed to all the parts of the body that make up the body image. This body image in question may vary from culture to culture. It may also vary in different subcultures and social statuses within the same culture. Therefore, in addition to being a biological mechanism, the body actually points to a world of meaning that is both social and individual. According to Anthony Synnott, our bodies and body parts, their qualities, functions, condition and sensations, are loaded with public and private, positive and negative, political and economic, sexual, moral and often controversial cultural symbolism. Height and weight, eating and drinking, making love, bodily posture and body language, even various diseases, the common cold or AIDS, are not simply physical phenomena, they are also social. Historically, the body has been the focus of very different approaches. For example, for a certain period the body was thought to be under the influence of occult and magical forces, and even diseases were thought to be caused by some dark forces. Later on, the body was treated with a mechanical understanding, like the internal mechanism of a clock. In the axis of religious beliefs, it was seen as a garment to be spent on the road to God. But throughout history the body has always been of central importance. The body, as a means of approaching God, is still at the center of institutional interventions today. But the aim is not to destroy the body. On the contrary, it is aimed at protecting it, taking care of it, making it healthy and beautiful. The perception of the body in the past, which was tried to be destroyed or discarded in order to ensure detachment from the material world, is today placed at the center of the material. In the years before 1980, scientific studies on the body were both marginalized and not widely known. In the 1980s, interest in the body and body practices began to grow intensively, with contributions from the disciplines of anthropology, sociology and art history. And bodily practices such as body cleansing, dancing, exercising, tattooing or piercing, gestures and mimics became the subject of research. There are some differences between the purposes of bodily practices in past societies and their purposes in today's industrial social structure. However, regardless of the social formation, the body is an important tool between society and the individual. For example, tattooing has become part of fashion rather than a requirement of a religion or stratification system, but it is still a sign of social membership in an urban tribe. In addition, although not out of necessity, tattoos can still be an expression of faith and a symbolic sign of social status. Tracing the history of tattooing and body art in general takes us back a long way. Archaeological data from excavations in South America, Japan and Egypt show that tattooing and the practice of body painting have a much longer history than previously thought. Modern tattooing dates back to the West's exploratory, colonial and missionary expeditions to the Pacific Islands in the 17th and 18th centuries. In particular, the voyages of Captain James Cook and other European explorers to Polynesia and their notes were very influential in introducing tattooing to the West. Beyond these notes, the fact that the crew tattooed themselves in these primitive tribes they encountered played a critical role in the introduction of tattoos to Europe. In the ancient civilizations of Europe, tattoos were not widely known and were rarely practiced in the Middle Ages. It was only after the exploration of Africa, America and Polynesia that tattooing, generally used as a rite of passage, protection from disease and evil, and for artistic and religious purposes. In ancient Egypt, tattoos often included motifs consisting of symbolic images of the gods. These divine images, which were engraved on the skin, were usually found on women's bodies and fulfilled a protective function. For example, the god Bez, who was known as the defender of all good and the fighter of all evil, the protector of homes, newborn babies and mothers, was believed to prevent dangerous situations that would affect the mother and the baby during childbirth. And for this reason, women tattooed this god on their bodies. The oldest known tattoos in communities with different cultures living in different geographies were obtained through mummies. On September 19, 1991, the approximately 5,300-year-old Iceman, also known as Ötzi, was found in the Ötztal Alps on the Austrian-Italian border. It was determined that he had 61 tattoos on his body before he died. Egyptian mummies also have various tattoos on their bodies. 4,000 years ago in Egypt, a female priest named Amont had tattoos on her hands. A stone tablet containing the Hammurabi Code found in the Susa region is the oldest known document on tattoos. One of the articles of the Hammurabi Code reads, "If a person tattoos the body of a slave in such a way as to prevent him from selling it without the permission of the owner and master, the fingers of the tattooed person must be cut off." Furthermore, Article 227 states that, if a stamp maker is deceived and stamps an unforgivable mark on the body of a slave belonging to another person, so as to prevent its sale, he must swear that he did not stamp it intentionally, and the punishment reserved for the deceiver shall not be applied to him. If we look at the historical development of the tattoo in the form of a table, we can extend its history back to the Stone Age. From 2.6 million years ago, paint cans made of clay and red earth related to tattooing have been found. The social place and use of tattooing has constantly changed and diversified throughout history. The majority of findings from ancient Egypt reveal that only women were tattooed. In later periods and in different regions, there are reports of both men and women being tattooed. But in general, it seems that tattooing was a body practice used to enhance feminine beauty. This shows that the use of tattoos as a practice of symbolic meaning-making depends on many variables and can also vary according to gender. In some ancient texts, narratives about stigmatization have been found. Although tattooing is not explicitly mentioned, the descriptions of the practice of stamping in these texts overlap with the practice of tattooing known today. On the other hand, tattooing was a practice of religious expression associated with Eastern nations such as the Egyptians and Syrians. In addition to all these purposes, perhaps the most widespread, and therefore the most important, tattooing was a practice that served to punish slaves who committed crimes, and it is argued that it came to the Greeks from Persia. These punitive tattoos were generally applied to the face and forehead, the parts of the body most open to interaction. In later periods of antiquity, tattooing was practiced not only for criminals, but also for soldiers and military personnel. There is a story that the tattoo came to the Greeks from Persia. This story illustrates not only the transition of the tattoo from one culture to another, but also its wide range of meanings and purposes. The story goes like this. Hystaius of Ionia, ruler of Miletus, was captured by the Persian king Darius. To encourage his son-in-law to revolt, Hystaius secretly shaved the head of his most trusted slave and pierced his head with needle and ink. The message Histius to Aristagoras: incite Ionia to revolt. In a few weeks the slave's hair grew over the tattoo and Histius sent his living letter. Having achieved his goal, the slave shaved. Aristagoras read the instructions written on the man's head and started a mad uprising that would end the Persian invasion of the Greeks. The Greeks used beatings primarily as a method of punishment, and they learned it from the Persians. In the Greeks and Romans, sometimes by branding and sometimes by forging. The offender's face was marked with the crime he had committed. In ancient wars, the symbol of the captor was permanently tattooed in ink on the foreheads of captives. For example, the Athenians tattooed an owl, the symbol of Athens, on the foreheads of their prisoners of war. However, unlike the tattoo known today, Roman slaves had the inscription, "Stop me, I'm a fugitive," tattooed on their upper eyebrows. From this point of view, we can also say that tattoos were used for control purposes. The fact that tattoos were largely used for control, punishment, and marking the enemy revealed a negative view of tattoos. Therefore, there was a close relationship between having a tattoo and the social devaluation of the individual. The practice of tattooing varied depending on the period in which it was practiced and the value attributed to the body. For example, until the 9th century, the Romans punished criminals by tattooing their hands rather than their faces. The reason for this was the belief that the face was to be sanctified and, as a result, should be subjected to as little disfigurement as possible. From the earliest historical findings on tattooing, it is evident that tattooing has been a dynamic cultural practice that has constantly evolved in terms of its purpose, prevalence, and the value attributed to it. While tattooing was evaluated on the axis of worthlessness in the social formation of ancient Greece and Rome, there were societies in the same period where permanent inking of one's own body was approved and even encouraged. For example, in Thrace, plain skins signaled anonymity, and tattooed men and women were much more admired. The Scythians carved their symbols on the bodies of the Thracians they had defeated. but Thracian women adorned the rest of their bodies with tattoos to erase the traces of this violence and shame and transform them. The motifs on Greek and Egyptian vases show that tattooing for body adornment added a sense of beauty and aesthetics to the demeaning meaning of tattooing in the Greeks. Male and female figures on the vases in question, animal and geometric motifs, especially emphasizing muscle texture and athletic strength tattoos were found. With all these, it is seen that tattooing is a body practice that has also been practiced by the Turks, and that this practice has a long history. Turkish, along with some drawings seen in the graves and motifs found on some of the corpses. A body practice symbolizing nobility and courage in Huns, Kyrgyz and Kazakhs. It is argued to be a tattoo. It is also known that during the Ottoman Empire, tattooing became widespread among sailors from the 17th century onwards, that interactions with Algerian sailors had a great impact on this, and that the tattoo, which became widespread among the Janissaries in that period, was used to symbolize the company to which the Janissaries belonged. The main idea that comes to the fore in defining traditional tattooing practices is that it is a tangible manifestation of what societies have produced about life. Since the beginning of man's journey in the world, he has always followed and imitated nature. While realizing all these goals, man has also taken the motifs he has embroidered on his body from nature. He has emphasized that he is an ordinary element of nature. The tattoo culture, which has been inherited from many different civilizations, invites researchers to a mysterious world with the images it contains. Today, tattoos, an art of body decoration, are pictographs that convey the norms of a society, the functioning of life and behavioral patterns. Tattoos, which have been used since ancient times, have been applied to the body for various reasons according to the perception of societies and the mentality of the period. As the reasons for tattooing were not the same in every culture, the place of tattooed people in social life was not the same. Tattoos, which were a sign of nobility in some cultures, were an expression of humiliation in some societies. In the historical process, tattoos were sometimes seen as a religious protective talisman, sometimes as a stain of shame of prisoners and criminals, sometimes as a sign of nobility of a higher rank, sometimes as a totem of a tribe, sometimes as a symbol of honor of war heroes, sometimes as regional memories of adventurous flirtatious sailors, sometimes as an element of curiosity exhibited in circuses. Historically, tattoos have symbolized nobility and beauty for women, while for men they have been associated with power and strength. In 21st century contemporary society, tattoos are associated with beauty and used as body ornaments regardless of gender. Considering this historical process, it can be stated that in the past, the social and cultural meanings of tattoos were relatively more collective and constituted a necessity, whereas today these have been replaced by individual meanings related to individual identities. The point to be noted here is that the relative weight and importance of the meanings associated or attributed to tattoos in the historical process have shifted rather than one replacing the other. Symbols are important and have been important throughout history. What makes them important are the meanings we attach to them. See you in my next video. Take care and goodbye.